Okay, perfect. So my name is Jen de Combe, and I serve as the Associate Secretary for Canadian Ministries. Canadian Ministries is a department of a national office that really works closely with congregations and with leaders. We work in the area of congregational renewal. We help new ministries get off the ground. We also support faith formation and oversee the granting programs. I think we're, as a denomination, as mainline churches, we're really struggling trying to figure out what to do next. And it's a difficult time for the church. And I think, we often focus on the wrong questions. Well, how do we reverse the decline? How do we get young people back? How do we do these different things? It's all like, how do we do this? But really, Scripture is pretty clear. Like, we're called to love God. We're called to love our neighbor. So I think the way forward is for churches to really ask themselves, like, this season, how can we love God? This season, how can we love our neighbor? And those are generative conversations that move us forward in ministry. And they're fun.
Yeah. I love that you've got us sharing ideas, and there's a couple ideas I've heard that I'm going to take back and use. Okay, so we were just talking about this flower idea that was mentioned. What is it?
The first time that Braeside did that was when we gathered for worship again after COVID, and everybody hadn't seen each other for a stretch of time. We started this service from a position of lament. And anybody who wanted to could come up and place a blue flower in the vase, and if they chose to, they could share with the congregation for whom or what circumstance they were placing the blue flower. And the blue flower represented loss, grief. We then did the same thing with white flowers, which represented change. And then we went into a time of joy and shared with each other the times and experiences that brought us joy, and placed pink flowers in the vase on any given Sunday at any point in time. There are people among us who are at each of those stages. So my experience with it is that it increased sensitivity to each other. It was an awesome opportunity for some vulnerability with each other, and deepened the bonds of friendship and relationships within the congregation. So we did.
I'm Bill Patterson. I'm an elder at Millwoods Presbytery in Edmonton. I was interested in people putting flowers in, more from the concept of how people in our congregation would convey to each other where they may be hurting. I think it's easier where people are happy, but to bring out and discuss things like illness, I think it's harder for most people to do.
And I think actually we've been talking about one of the blessings of the pandemic is that people are willing to be more vulnerable. People are willing to share what life moments have been difficult, what life moments bring them joy. And so there's this openness to share more deeply. And I think there's a real invitation for the church to step into that. And how do we have deeper relationships with people? And part of that is sharing our stories. And then it's in those deeper relationships that we can discern together how God is being present for us and calling us into the future.
We've been hearing a lot of great ideas at this elders workshop, and one was the kaleidoscope Bible study approach. I know nothing about that. What is that?
And so this Bible study tries to give everybody a voice. It's by mutual invitation, and really like a lectionary reading where you read the same passage 3 times. The first time you're invited to share one thing that stands out to you. The second time is about the content. And the third time asks, what is God asking you to be or do or change? So it has that familiar pattern of 3 questions, 3 readings of Scripture. What is really unique about it is, as people share, they ask the next person, they invite the next person. So I would share and I would say, Mark, I invite you. And each person responds to the question. It's a devotional Bible study, so it comes from people's experience rather than their knowledge of the Scripture. There is power in inviting someone to speak.
I think there's good reason to be hopeful. I think we have a faith tradition that calls us to remember that God has been present, that God has been faithful, and God will continue to be faithful. We're at a moment now where we're waiting to see how God will show up and how God will lead us forward. But we know from our past that God does this. This is how God moves. And so just to really to trust in our faith, to trust in God's abiding presence, to trust in the future that God is calling us towards, and just walk faithfully day by day with Christ.